Case of Alicia Navarro. Alicia Navarro was born on September 20th, 2004, in Glendale, Arizona, USA. She is the eldest of 3 children. Her parents are Jessica Nunez and Rojan. Jessica immigrated to the United States in search of a better future for herself and later for her children. After settling in the US, Alicia was born. By that time, Jessica had already separated from Alicia's father, Rojan. Later, she began a relationship with a man named Ivan Nunez. According to Jessica, Alicia is a shy, kind, intelligent, and very thoughtful girl. She loves reading, playing video games, and spending time with her loved ones. She had very few friends and had little contact with her peers, preferring to stay at home rather than go outside. Gradually, the differences between her and other teenagers became clear. She had difficulty connecting with the world around her and was unable to recognize other people's emotions. In addition, she often experiences anxiety attacks. Physically, her height and weight are significantly lower than her friends of the same age. Add to that, Alicia has a very special habit. For example, she always wears the same clothes and shoes every day, regardless of whether they are clean or dirty or whether the weather changes. Even in the sweltering heat, she always wears her favorite sweatshirt. Jessica, Alicia's mother, mentioned that her daughter did not enjoy being around unfamiliar people. She felt most comfortable and safe in her room, which was her favorite place. Despite this, she loved visiting fast food restaurants, and for a long time, her favorite meal was chicken nuggets. After consulting specialists at the local psychological diagnostic center, Jessica learned that she had high-functioning autism. People with this disorder often have difficulty communicating with others. They also often appear clumsy and sloppy. Following her diagnosis, Alicia began therapy, which helped her lead a relatively normal life. As Alicia grew older, she spent more of her free time in her room playing Minecraft on her computer. She also used Discord, a popular messaging app among gamers, to chat with people she had never met in person. She also had accounts on popular social media sites, where she could freely communicate with friends and acquaintances without any inconvenience, unlike in real life. Initially, Jessica was not concerned about this behavior. She believed her daughter was cautious when talking to strangers and understood the risks that could occur. Soon, the changes in Alicia's behavior caught her mother's attention, Jessica. She began saving her allowance to buy cosmetics, perfumes, and revealing clothes, behavior that was unlike the Alicia they had known before. Jessica thought it was due to the natural changes that teenagers go through at this age and believed that the problem should be approached calmly. By September 2019, 14-year-old Alicia transferred to a new Catholic school in Phoenix to start the new academic year. It seemed that her anxiety had become more severe than ever, perhaps because of having to get to know and interact with new classmates and teachers. According to Jessica, Alicia never said that she was unhappy or had any problems at school. However, she began to ask her mother for permission to stay home. This mainly happened on Thursdays and Fridays. On Saturday, September 14th, 2019, Jessica and her children had gone on a family trip to a local chocolate factory. According to Jessica, she appeared relaxed and even happy throughout the outing. Jessica could never have imagined that she was about to make a decision that would upend their lives. At around 1 a.m. on September 15th, Alicia left her room and ran to her mother, who was still awake waiting for her husband to return from work. She asked her mother what time she should go to bed, then went to the kitchen to get something to eat. Jessica was surprised by her daughter's strange behavior, but she thought it was just normal anxiety, so she didn't pay much attention. A while later, Jessica's husband returned, and they both went to bed, unaware that something bad might be about to happen. Alicia's mother, Jessica, woke up around 7 a.m. and went straight to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the family. When she entered the kitchen, she noticed that the door leading to the yard was open, which caught her attention. She looked outside but didn't see anyone. She then went to Alicia's room and found her daughter gone. After collecting herself, Jessica checked Alicia's belongings and found a note on the desk. It was left by Alicia, saying that she had run away. She was sorry, and that she didn't know when she would be back or if she would ever be back. Alarmed, Jessica immediately called the police to report her daughter's disappearance. When the police arrived, they inspected Alicia's room. During the investigation, they found that she had taken her laptop and phone but had left all of her chargers at home. She also packed nearly all her cosmetics and one of her favorite comics. Jessica explained that a few weeks earlier, Alicia had pleaded with her to buy that particular comic, as it was a limited edition and highly valuable to fans. Wanting to make her daughter happy, Jessica had decided to grant her request, understanding how much it meant to Alicia. Additionally, they discovered that Alicia did not have her daily medications with her, which made her mother even more worried. Alicia's refusal to take her medication put her mental health at risk. However, signs such as the fact that she did not have chargers, medications, or money with her made people think that she would be returning home soon. The police launched an investigation and analyzed Alicia's social media activity but found no clues about her whereabouts. There were no messages or signs that she had planned to meet any acquaintances. Still, Jessica is convinced that someone on the internet influenced her daughter to leave home. In a later interview, Jessica shared that several months before Alicia's disappearance, she had accompanied her to meet some friends at a shopping center. Jessica noticed that the people Alicia was meeting seemed slightly older than her, and she appeared particularly interested in one of the young men. However, the authorities did not consider this detail significant. Several witnesses reported seeing a teenage girl resembling Alicia at a park about 20 kilometers from her home. According to the story, the girl seemed to be with an adult man. However, this lead did not yield any clear results. At the same time, Alicia's mother, Jessica, posted a video on social media. In the video, she wished Alicia a happy birthday and expressed her deep love for her daughter at the same time. She also called on everyone to help find her daughter. She also took other actions, such as posting posters and organizing a fundraising campaign to increase her chances of finding Alicia. At this time, the police discovered that on Thursday, September 12th, Alicia had been messaging a 20-year-old man named Clark, who lived in Oregon. Even though there was an age difference, they became friends. Their conversations revolved around video games. However, Clark said that Alicia had told him about a man she met on social media. She also talked about plans to meet this person. Clark admitted that he knew Alicia was very young, and that was why he had never taken her words seriously, thinking they were just fabrications. But this time, things seemed completely different. Jessica firmly maintained her account of her daughter's kidnapping, while Arizona state authorities concluded that the girl had left home voluntarily. Alicia's disappearance became one of the most perplexing cases for law enforcement, her mother, and the public, who closely followed the investigation. After 11 months, the Arizona police announced that Alicia's case remained unresolved, but was no longer a priority. They assumed she didn't want to go home, though it was unclear what evidence supported this claim. Perhaps they were correct, but Jessica refused to accept this explanation. When she no longer received help from the police, she turned to the national media for support. She was determined not to give up and wanted to find her daughter's whereabouts. Jessica also continues fundraising activities to sustain the search for Alicia. She worked with private investigators and raised over $120,000. The money was used as a reward for anyone who could provide vital information about Alicia's whereabouts. Reports of sightings of Alicia or a girl resembling her began to appear from many places across the country. In 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children posted a new portrait of Alicia on its website. The image was created through a special program that simulated her adult appearance. When Jessica saw the portrait, she felt confused and surprised because she thought the image did not completely resemble her daughter's real appearance. Despite the time that had passed since Alicia disappeared, Jessica refused to lose hope. She feared for her daughter's safety but remained steadfast in her belief that Alicia could be found. Jessica emphasized that she missed her daughter very much and looked forward to her return. On July 26, 2023, nearly 4 years after Alicia mysteriously disappeared, she unexpectedly resurfaced. She arrived at a police station in a small town in Montana near the Canadian border. A young girl who appeared to be a teenager walked into the station and identified herself as Alicia Navarro. She claimed to be the same girl who had vanished 4 years earlier in Arizona and requested to be removed from the missing persons list. Initially, the exact name of the town where Alicia appeared was not revealed. Local law enforcement began verifying the information she provided, and it soon became clear that the girl was indeed Alicia Navarro. Following this, news of her return was announced. In Arizona, the police confirmed that Alicia was safe, unharmed, and in a secure location. That same day, Jessica shared the news of her daughter's return. She posted a message expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported and helped in the search. Jessica likened her daughter's return to a beacon of light, bringing hope to parents whose children have gone missing or been kidnapped. She emphasized the importance of not losing hope, continuing the search, and believing in the possibility of a reunion. According to reports from Arizona police and the FBI, Alicia's case is still under investigation. Authorities are trying to clarify the circumstances that led to her leaving home. Glendale police said Alicia will not be charged because she has been fully cooperative in the investigation. Regarding her health, she showed signs of mental stress, but her physical health is stable. She also shared that she is ready to return home and reunite with her family. The following day, several videos featuring Alicia were shared publicly. In these videos, she explains that during the time she left the house, no one harmed her. She also expressed gratitude to law enforcement for their efforts in locating her and helping her return home. Montana authorities revealed that Alicia was found in Havre, a small town with a population of less than 10,000. During the investigation into her disappearance, a man named Edmund Davis was arrested. Edmund, who was 36 years old at the time, had been living with Alicia. Little is known about him, but neighbors reported that he had spent most of his life in Montana. His social media activities show that he is suffering from depression, lack of confidence, and weight issues. Regarding his employment, it was confirmed that he had been working the night shift at a local supermarket in recent months. In the photos shared on Edmund's social media, Alicia appeared calm and even happy, suggesting they seemed to enjoy their time together. However, it's important to note that when Alicia left home, she was only 14 years old while Edmund was 32. Given her existing mental health issues, she was likely easy to manipulate. Whether Edmund exploited this situation remains unclear, but the nature of their relationship initially appeared deeply troubling. FBI agents and experts working on the case believe that Alicia was the victim of a crime committed by Edmund without her even knowing it. They believe she may be experiencing a phenomenon similar to Stockholm Syndrome, also known as trauma-induced attachment. This is a special state of mind in which the victim develops a close relationship with her captor. This phenomenon can occur for a variety of reasons, such as her mental health issues. Experts believe that Alicia's refusal to take her prescribed medication may have been the reason she did not realize she had been kidnapped. Most importantly, Alicia's mysterious disappearance was closed when she was reunited with her family. After her return, it appeared that her life was no longer in danger. The main efforts in the case came not from the police, but from Alicia's mother, Jessica. She never gave up hope, even when local law enforcement stopped searching. She was always persistent, utilizing every resource she could, from media to social networks, in the hope that one day she would see her daughter return safely. Karen Slattery was born on September 18, 1969, in New York. She had an older brother and loving parents who were devout Catholics. When Karen was just a year old, the family decided to move to Florida, eventually settling in a suburban town called Boynton Beach. As she grew older, Karen started attending the local Catholic school and got involved in various activities like softball, swimming, and gymnastics. Living in a coastal town, she and her friends often spent time at the beach, soaking up the sun and enjoying the warm ocean waters. A few years after their move, Karen's younger sister was born and the two became very close. Her little sister looked up to her, mimicked all of her interests, and basically saw Karen as a role model. At 14, Karen started high school, which had a special babysitting program. The idea was simple. Parents who needed a babysitter for their kids would contact the school, and they would assign a student from the program who had attended the necessary training. For Karen, this was a great opportunity to earn her first bit of money. She loved kids and had plenty of experience looking after her younger sister, so she signed up right away. Karen quickly gained respect and trust from the local families. They loved her as well as their kids, so she always had plenty of babysitting jobs lined up. At the same time, she excelled in swimming and planned to use her athletic skills to secure a college scholarship after high school. On March 24, 1984, Karen was scheduled to babysit two girls whose parents had hired her many times before. Although Karen initially wanted to spend that weekend with her friends and even considered turning down the job, she decided against it. One of her close friends had recently moved to another state and Karen was eager to visit her during the upcoming break. To afford the trip, she needed to save up for the plane tickets. That evening, Karen's mom drove her to the family's house where she'd be babysitting. The parents welcomed Karen, reminded her to lock all the doors, and left for the night. For the next few hours, Karen and the girls had a great time. They played games, watched cartoons, had dinner, and around 9:30 p.m., Karen tucked them into bed. She then went back to the living room and called her best friend. The two chatted about their plans for the next day. Her friend's dad had gotten them tickets to a baseball game and they were both really excited. After that call, Karen rang up another friend who was also babysitting that night. They exchanged stories about how their evenings were going and Karen mentioned she was heading to the kitchen to grab something to eat. She promised to call back in a few minutes, but that call never came. Since it was already late, her friend just assumed Karen had fallen asleep. Around midnight, the girls' parents arrived home and immediately noticed something odd. The porch light was off, even though they always left it on at night. Inside, the house was completely dark and even the TV was turned off. As they approached the front door, they realized it wasn't locked. Assuming Karen might have forgotten to lock it, they entered the house and started calling her name, but there was no response. They began turning on the lights, and when they reached the kitchen, they were met with a horrifying sight. A massive pool of blood covered the kitchen floor. The phone, which hung on the wall nearby, was dangling from its cord, and a long trail of blood led from the kitchen down the hallway toward the bedrooms where the children were sleeping. Both bedroom doors were closed, but they noticed light coming from under one of them. Fearing someone might still be inside, the father told his wife to run to the neighbors and call the police. He stayed behind, torn between wanting to check on his daughters and dreading the possibility that they might already be dead, so he couldn't bring himself to open the door. A few minutes later, a patrol officer arrived on the scene. He instructed the father to wait outside and began searching the house. Opening the door to the girls' bedroom, he found them both lying in bed, both sound asleep and unharmed. The officer carefully picked them up and carried the girls outside to their parents, who were overwhelmed with relief that their children were safe. But their relief quickly turned to dread as they remembered about Karen and informed the officer that there was another girl inside the house. The officers went back and followed the trail of blood, which led to the master bedroom door. When he opened it, he discovered a body on the floor. He checked for a pulse, but there was none. While he was in the room, more police officers and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Investigators quickly identified the victim as Karen Slattery. Her clothes were partially missing, suggesting a possible assault, and a towel had been placed over her face. Her body showed multiple injuries consistent with stab wounds. After Karen's body was taken away for further examination, detectives began searching the house for clues. They noticed that a window in the living room was open and the screen had been cut. They also found boot prints and trampled vegetation outside several windows, indicating that the perpetrator might have been watching Karen from outside before cutting the screen and breaking into the house. The investigators found a few more unusual clues. In addition to the boot prints, there were also barefoot tracks on the ground, as well as inside the house. This suggested that the perpetrator had removed their boots before entering. During their conversation with the homeowners, police learned that Karen always locked the front door when she was babysitting. Given that the door was unlocked when they returned, the detectives realized the killer might have exited through it after the attack. As for the open window, the homeowners explained that they had left it open before leaving because the weather was cool and fresh that day. Realizing that their action might have allowed the killer into the house, they were both shocked and began blaming themselves for Karen's death. The police also discovered bicycle tracks in the yard, indicating that the killer had likely arrived on a bike and used it to flee the scene. They managed to follow the tire tracks to the main road along the coast, but the trail ended there. Forensic experts attempted to take casts of the barefoot prints, but they were all smeared. They also couldn't find any foreign fingerprints anywhere in the house, which was highly unusual. From the evidence in the bathroom, it appeared that the perpetrator had taken a shower, yet even there, no fingerprints were found. Investigators believe the attacker struck Karen while she was standing by the phone in the kitchen. Nearby, they found a bloodied hammer, which might have been the initial weapon. No knife matching the wounds on the victim was found in the house, indicating that the killer had likely taken it with him. The hammer, it turned out, was taken from a cabinet inside the house, suggesting that the killer had searched for it before attacking Karen. He had also taken a pair of women's gloves from the same cabinet, which he probably took with him when he left. No other items, including valuables, were missing from the home, which cast doubt on the idea that it was a robbery gone wrong. The medical examiners found 18 stab wounds on Karen's body, which were determined to be the cause of death. They also confirmed that she had been assaulted and found biological material on her body, but DNA analysis was still in its infancy at the time and wasn't widely used. Interestingly, a piece of chewing gum was found stuck to her shorts. Karen had recently had her braces removed and was excited to finally be able to chew gum again. But the experts were puzzled about how it ended up on her shorts, speculating that the killer might have placed it there. With no other substantial leads, the police turned to the public for help, asking for any information about suspicious men who might be riding bicycles and behaving oddly around town. Investigators also began looking into individuals with prior records for breaking and entering, hoping to find a connection to the crime. The news of Karen's murder sent shockwaves through the entire town. Parents became fearful, convinced that a dangerous criminal was on the loose, and stopped letting their children go anywhere alone. The school's babysitting program also underwent a major overhaul. What used to be a common practice of having students babysit in the children's homes was now deemed too risky. From then on, the girls were instructed to be vigilant at all times, double-check all windows and doors, and if possible, work in pairs. It was even suggested that parents drop off their children at the babysitter's house instead and pick them up afterwards. The local police department dedicated nearly all of its resources to the case, as the community demanded to catch the killer as quickly as possible. They tried to speak with the girls Karen had been babysitting, hoping they might have seen something. One of the girls mentioned being woken up by a man with blood on his face, but she couldn't remember any details. As for the parents, a theory quickly emerged that they might somehow be involved in the murder. The suspicion was largely driven by the fact that they had the opportunity to commit the crime, even though no clear motive was apparent. The suspicions only grew when the family moved to another state just 2 days after the incident. Soon, the police had another suspect. One of the officers was investigating a completely unrelated case involving the burglary of a mobile home. When the detective tracked down the culprit, he discovered that the suspect had been getting around on a bicycle. But that wasn't all. Traces that looked like blood were found on one of the bike's handlebars, and a piece of gum was lodged in the spokes. The gum was the same color as the one found on Karen's shorts. The investigators sent the bike to the lab and began considering the possibility that Karen's murder might have been the result of a botched burglary. However, the lab results showed that the gum was a different flavor, and what they thought was blood on the handlebar turned out to be just paint. As the police continued their search for the killer, Karen's friends and family organized a fund to offer a reward for information leading to an arrest, starting with $10,000. The amount quickly grew to $30,000 and eventually to $50,000. The community was eager to bring the perpetrator to justice, not only to find closure for Karen's family, but also for their own safety. This significant amount of money led to thousands of calls flooding into the police department, and officers tried to follow up on every lead. A large number of people urged them to investigate the parents of the girls Karen had been babysitting, believing they might be involved in the murder. Eventually, the detectives had to make a public statement, clarifying that the parents were not considered suspects and that their alibi had been thoroughly verified. Not long after, a woman living just a few streets away from the crime scene contacted the police with a rather strange story. She said that she had returned home to find drops of blood on the floor and a note addressed to her nephew. Investigators reached out to the nephew, who confirmed the woman's account. According to him, the note was from his 22-year-old friend, who had a criminal record and had left the state the day after Karen's murder. Detectives tracked down the man in Ohio, where he admitted that he had indeed written the note and slipped it through the mail slot at the woman's house. But he claimed he didn't see any blood and insisted that he had nothing to do with the murder. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and undergo a polygraph test. During that test, the operator flagged several of his answers as deceptive, but the man continued to deny any involvement in the crime. In the end, with insufficient evidence to make an arrest, the police had no choice but to continue their investigation. Around this time, the county police department received a new, expensive device that could detect fingerprints with 10 times the efficiency of older technology. The investigators working on Karen's case requested to borrow the device and decided to re-examine the crime scene. This time, they managed to uncover dozens of new fingerprints. However, after running them through their database, the experts concluded that all these prints belonged to the family members and their friends. In the next few weeks, the police followed up on thousands of leads and investigated numerous suspects, but nothing led to a breakthrough. The situation was further complicated by the fact that crime rates in the city had nearly reached record highs that year. The number of murders, assaults, and other crimes had significantly increased, putting additional strain on the police force. At one point, the police even recommended that parents submit their children's fingerprints to make it easier to locate them in case of a kidnapping, and many people responded to this request. For a while, there were no significant developments in Karen's case, but 2 months after the murder, everything changed. On May 29th, police discovered the body of 38-year-old Georgiana Warren in her home, just a few miles from Karen's town. Georgiana was found on her bed with a pillow covering her face and a hammer was lying nearby. The house showed numerous signs of a struggle, including traces of blood on the bed and in the bathroom, as well as indications that the perpetrator had taken a shower. Investigators determined that the killer likely entered the house through a window. Medical experts found that Georgiana had been assaulted and recovered biological material from the body. The detectives couldn't help but notice the striking similarities between this murder and Karen's. It was almost a replica. Georgiana's 2 daughters were in the house that night, but the attacker left them unharmed and they heard nothing. Everyone suspected that the same person was responsible for both crimes, but once again, no fingerprints were found at the scene. At the end, experts decided to examine a book found next to the bed, checking all of its pages for fingerprints. They hoped the killer might have touched it during the murder, so they used the expensive new device to analyze every page. And this effort paid off. They discovered a foreign fingerprint on page 43, which could potentially belong to the murderer. In 1984, there were no digital fingerprint databases, but the detectives were able to compare this print with those of all suspects, hoping for a match. They also uncovered another possible link between the murders of Karen and Georgiana. It turned out that one of Karen's friends had been babysitting her children just days before the murder. Detective Kevin McCoy began to consider that the elusive killer might be connected to other cases that weren't immediately obvious. The perpetrator's ability to avoid leaving fingerprints and evade witnesses suggested significant experience with such crimes. McCoy then recalled an unusual case he had been assigned a month before Karen's murder in Boca Raton. An unknown man had broken into a woman's bedroom, struck her several times with a heavy object, removed her clothing and ring, and then simply left. The woman survived, but the injuries resulted in severe brain damage. Detective McCoy suspected that the same perpetrator might be responsible, but unfortunately, the victim was unable to recall any details about the attacker. As McCoy continued to search for connections to other cases, he came across another intriguing incident. On May 22nd, 2 months after Karen's murder, a woman was returning home with her son around 2 a.m. To their surprise, they saw a man removing the security screen from their window and attempting to break into the house. The woman's son chased the man, who tried to escape on his bicycle. Although the cyclist managed to briefly evade capture, the son eventually tackled him. The struggle was short, but the man managed to break free and escape by jumping into a canal, disappearing from view. In his haste, the man left behind not only his bicycle, but also his sneakers, which were found under the window. It appeared he had removed them before the homeowners returned. 2 days later, a woman in the same town woke up to a heavy blow to her head and screamed. When she opened her eyes, she saw a man running out of her bedroom. That same evening, a man burst into another woman's bedroom and began threatening her. The woman screamed loudly, which apparently scared off the intruder. He simply turned and left. For days later, a similar incident occurred. An unknown man broke into another woman's home and frightened her, causing her to scream. The attacker left the house, stumbled, and fell into her pool before fleeing. Detective McCoy believed all these incidents were connected and soon focused on a new series of crimes. Over the past few months, several female students from a local university reported a man exposing himself on campus and breaking into their dorms. They all described him as a white male of average height with short dark hair, and the police created a composite sketch of the suspect. McCoy took this sketch and began examining a large book of mugshots of individuals who had been charged with sex offenses, as he carefully studied each face. One of them caught his eye. It looked just like the sketch. He pulled that photo out, mixed it with a few others, and then showed them to one of the students who had seen the suspect. Without hesitation, she pointed to the man she recognized. The man was 23-year-old Dwayne Owen, who had a lengthy criminal history, ranging from theft to public indecency and other offenses. This was enough to get a warrant, but there was a catch. The detective had no clue where Owen was. McCoy put out a citywide alert, sending his photo to every cop in the area. A few days later, an officer was patrolling the streets when she noticed a man who looked strikingly similar to Owen. She asked for his identification, and he presented a military ID under the name Dan Brown. The officer suspected that the ID might be fake, because the man looked so much like Owen's mugshot. So, she decided to arrest him and take him in for questioning. After running his fingerprints against those on file, it was clear this was Dwayne Owen. This allowed authorities to charge him with using a false ID, which led to his imprisonment while they focused on linking him to the murders and assaults. During interrogation, Owen admitted that the sneakers and bicycle found at the crime scene, where he had tried to enter a house through a window, belonged to him. He also confessed to several burglaries, but continued to deny any involvement in the murders. At the time, it was still not possible to match his DNA with the biological material from the crime scenes, because the technology wasn't there yet. Detectives questioned Owen for hours. He clearly enjoyed the process, often speaking in riddles and sometimes answering their questions in poems. When asked directly if he had killed anyone, he simply said yes, but didn't provide any details. Interestingly, when they asked him how many people he had killed, he remained silent. Instead, he drew the number 2 on the table with his finger. The man also bragged to the detectives that he knew criminology inside out and could commit crimes without getting caught. But he overlooked one crucial detail. Authorities had requested a comparison of his fingerprints with those found on one of the pages in Georgiana's book. And they finally made a breakthrough. The fingerprints matched. When detectives returned to the interrogation room and informed Owen that his fingerprints had been found at one of the crime scenes, Owen responded with a smile, saying, "I must have touched that stupid book lying on the bed." Soon after, Owen began to talk, confessing to all the details of this crime. He described how he wandered the streets looking for a house with a potential victim, broke in, and carried out the murder, giving detailed accounts of Georgiana's killing. One of the most chilling details was that Owen had brought a clean set of clothes and left them on his bike, planning to change after the crime. But despite this confession, Owen continued to deny involvement in Karen's murder, and the police still didn't have any evidence to link him. So one of the detectives decided to bluff. He took Owen's footprints, but none of the footprints at Karen's crime scene matched because they were all smudged. The detective then decided to try a little trick. He took some random photo of a bloody footprint and placed it next to Owen's footprint. Then he told Owen they had a match and now had proof he was in the house. To the detective's surprise, the bluff worked. Owen looked at the photos and admitted they did look alike. Not long after, he started confessing. According to Owen, he had been riding his bicycle around the area when, around 8 p.m., he saw Karen through a window and decided to kill her. First, he went to a bar, had a drink, stayed for a while, and returned to the house after dark. There, he watched the victim through the window for some time, before removing his socks and putting them on his hands to avoid leaving fingerprints on the window frame. Once inside, he hid in a closet, where he found a pair of women's gloves and a hammer. After a while, he saw Karen go to the kitchen and pick up the phone. Owen panicked, thinking she might have spotted him and was calling the police. He jumped out of his hiding place, attacked her, and dragged her into the master bedroom to assault her. Owen then took a shower, gathered his bloody clothes, and went outside to hide them in nearby bushes. He mocked the detectives, saying they had done a poor job because they hadn't checked all the bushes in the area. As for the knife, he rode his bicycle to the ocean and threw it into the water. After disposing of the evidence, he went home, where he lived with his brother and another roommate. He set the kitchen wall clock back by 2 hours and made a lot of noise until both roommates woke up. When they came out and asked him to be quiet, he apologized and said, "What time is it now?" Both men looked at the clock and saw the wrong time. Owen hoped this would give him an alibi if the police questioned his roommates. After his confession, Owen was charged with the 2 murders and went to prison awaiting his trial. As investigators dug into Dwayne Owen's background, they uncovered a troubling history. He grew up in extremely troubled circumstances. His parents, who struggled with alcohol and drug abuse, died when he was a child. As a result, he and his brother were shuffled between several foster homes. When Owen grew up, he briefly served in the military and then took criminal justice classes in college. He later confessed that he had hoped to become a police officer, but a minor criminal record dashed those dreams. Frustrated by his thwarted ambitions, he chose to take a different path. After being charged with the murders, he also admitted to numerous other crimes, including assaults, indecent exposure, voyeurism, as well as breaking and entering. At the same time, he insisted that Karen and Georgiana were the only victims he had killed. While he was awaiting trial, Owen almost managed to escape from prison. He got inside a trash bin, hoping it would be loaded into a truck and taken out of the facility. Fortunately, prison guards discovered him before he could make his escape. The trial for Karen's murder began a year later. He refused to admit guilt, and his lawyers claimed that his confessions had been coerced and that his rights had been violated. But when the full confession tapes were played in court, there was no doubt about his guilt. In the end, Owen received 2 death sentences, one for Karen's murder and one for Georgiana's. In addition to the murder charges, he was also given 6 life sentences for his other crimes. Since then, Owen has been awaiting the execution of his death sentence. But his story didn't end there. Owen soon filed an appeal in Karen's case, arguing that his right to remain silent had been violated. He pointed to the fact that during interrogations, he repeatedly said, "I don't want to talk about this." But the police continued to question him. To everyone's surprise, the court accepted his appeal, and all charges in that case were dropped. The prosecution appealed this decision, and after 7 years was granted a new trial, which again resulted in a death sentence. Since then, Owen has been in prison awaiting execution. As is often the case, there was a long delay between the sentencing and the actual execution, and this case was no exception. Owen's execution was scheduled for June 15, 2023, nearly 39 years after the murders. Karen's younger sister came to witness the death of her sister's killer. She wanted to look Owen in the eyes, but he kept them closed until the very end. It's worth noting that Karen's sister chose a career in law enforcement and became a sheriff. She has said that after Karen's murder, she suffered from insomnia and decided that if she couldn't sleep, she might as well be doing something useful. The case of Estebales Carranza. Estebales was born in September 1978 in Guadalajara, Mexico. Her father is Armando, a psychologist, journalist, and author of books on esotericism. Her mother is Angela, Spanish. In 1983, at the age of 5, Estebales left Mexico with his parents and younger brother, settled in Barcelona, Spain. Estebales had a fairly normal childhood. although her father, Armando, was very strict and not easygoing. Her father's anger made her think of ways to get rid of him. Despite this, he let her study at prestigious schools and later supported her studies at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. As she grew up, she became sociable and had many friends. However, she also suffered from frequent mood swings and anger, during which she could become quite aggressive. As an adult, Estebales moved to Germany and lived in Munich for a while. She used her connections to find work, and she landed a job at an ice cream parlor in the nearby city of Nuremberg. She spoke German fluently, which helped her settle in easily, and her friendly demeanor made it easy for her to connect with the locals. While working at the ice cream parlor, she met her first husband, Holger Holtz, who sold refrigerators and was part of the Krishna religious community. He was 14 years older than she, and a few weeks after they met, he proposed to her because he was passionately in love with her. They soon married and moved to Berlin. Estebales found various jobs, but her life was not fulfilling. Right after the wedding, she and her husband Holger had a conflict. Despite his successful career, but he began to insult and physically abuse her. Nevertheless, they continued their married life, and in 2000, they relocated to Vienna, Austria. In Vienna, they had the opportunity to start their own business, opening the ice cream parlor Schlickscherie on the busy Oswald Gas Street. The ice cream shop quickly became famous with the locals. Nearby was the Iman hairdressing salon, and at the end of the building's lobby, a staircase led to apartments on the upper floors. There was also a basement entrance located under the stairs. Estebales and Holger made a large sum of money. However, he asked her to reimburse him for all the expenses they had spent in the first year of opening the ice cream shop. Estebales, ice cream shop owner, dedicated herself to her work and grow her store successfully. Meanwhile, her husband Holger has an interest in weapons technology, which causes more conflicts between the two. He asked her to join his Krishna religion, but she felt it was quite strange. In the end, she decided to follow this religion. Estebales' business has allowed her to get to know many people, including several men. Over the years, she had several lovers, some with her clients, others with suppliers, tourists, or neighbors. One of them was Manfred Hinterberger, 48, a representative of a company that manufactures industrial equipment, such as freezers, refrigerators, and ice cream machines. After many years of knowing each other, she started dating Manfred in 2008. She decides to divorce her husband, Holger, but he will only accept if she pays him the debt she owes. Since she did not want to pay the debts, they decided to live together in a small apartment. On April 27, 2008, after finishing the shift at the ice cream shop, Estebales returned home. Then she had a heated argument with Holger, during which he hurled insults at her and accused her of cheating throughout their marriage. In a moment of anger, he threatened to take drastic action. While he was seated at the computer, facing away from her, she took the weapon and attacked him. After ensuring he was dead, she moved his body to the bathroom and left it there. She was sure the gunshots would be heard by the neighbors, which meant the police would soon arrive at her house. However, nothing happened. After waiting until nightfall, Estebales moved the body to the living room sofa and went to bed. 2 days later, she attempted to dispose of the body by setting it on fire. However, the smoke escaping from her apartment attracted attention, and a neighbor called the fire department. When they tried to enter her apartment, she stopped them, claiming everything was fine and that she had simply burned her lunch. A few days later, Estebales considered buying an electric saw. Although she didn't know how to use one, the store staff helped her learn. Upon returning home, she began dismembering the body, placing all the parts, including the head, into a bag and storing them in the freezer. Later, she transferred the remains into empty ice cream containers and covered them with cement. Next, she moved these containers to her ice cream shop and stored them in the basement freezer, where they were eventually discovered. Estebales' main motive for the crime was her frustration with her husband, Holger, refusing to move out of their apartment, and he refused divorce. Additionally, she had financial debts to him that she wanted to avoid repaying. As time passed, she continued to live her life normally. and no one seemed to notice Holger's disappearance. They had only been living in Austria for a short time, so they had very few friends here, so no one asked about him. If anyone asked about she will mention that he went to India. The regular customers at her ice cream shop didn't notice any change in her behavior, and no one suspected anything. Estabella's relationship with Manfred grew closer, and eventually they moved in together. She asked Manfred for money to help her business, and he gave her over $100,000, allowed her access to his bank accounts. However, he also wanted she to spend more time with him and to enhance her appearance. To achieve this, he pressured her to get plastic surgery, which she did not want. She had dreams of becoming a mother, but since he already had children, he couldn't help her fulfill that desire. Their relationship took a turn for the worse when Estabelas discovered that Manfred had been having affairs with several other women. Feeling betrayed, she plotted her revenge. In preparation, she took shooting courses to improve the necessary skills. After completing the lessons, she felt ready to take action. To avoid leaving any evidence, she covered the floors and walls of their apartment with cling film. On the night of November 21st, 2010, Estabelas and Manfred returned from a joint trip and had sex. Afterward, she confronted he about his infidelity, but he denied it and fell asleep. In a moment of anger, she grabbed a gun and attacked him on the neck while he was sleeping. She left his body on the bed for the entire day before moving it to the bathroom. Using an electric saw, she cut the body into pieces, this time doing so with more care and skill. Estabelas couldn't find any cement, so she decided to store the body parts in a refrigeration unit in the basement. However, the unit couldn't fit the entire body, leaving her to hide most of the remains in her apartment, where she covered them with cat litter to minimize the smell of decomposition. After taking care of this, she continued with her daily routine. Meanwhile, Manfred's relatives began to ask about his whereabouts. Estabelas told them that he had left for Thailand. They believed her story and stopped asking further questions. Shortly after Estabelas met Ronald, an Austrian man, he became her lover and the father of her unborn child. It seemed like her life was getting better. After all, she had managed to evade the consequences of her previous actions. Who would suspect that this charming and friendly woman, known by everyone as kind-hearted, was capable of such deeds? One day, workers repairing the building next to the Estabelas ice cream shop entered its basement to access the sewer and discovered a damaged pipe. The building's common drainage system is located in the storage rooms, which are separate small basements used for storage. As they entered the basement, they smelled rottenness mixed with cat litter deodorant, which piqued their curiosity. They traced the odor to two large freezers that appeared to have been abandoned for a long time. When they opened the freezers, they were shocked to find containers filled with cement. Inside one freezer, they saw a hand and a leg. In the other, a head. They also discovered two rifles with optical sights, a woman's handbag containing a pistol, a beret, and a notebook with notes in Spanish. Terrified, they quickly left the basement. They informed the hairdresser next door about the discovery, urging her to call the police. When the police arrived, they searched the basement and found the remains of two dismembered bodies. One was in several pieces, while the other was just a severed head, all encased in cement-filled containers. The remains were sent to the forensic medical examination in Vienna. During the initial investigation, authorities were unable to determine who owned the basement. This was because the basement had not been used for a long time and no other suspicious items were discovered. Investigators began to analyze the evidence they had collected. The next day, after the police arrived at the crime scene, Estabelas came to work. A neighbor informed her about the discovery in the building's basement and mentioned that the police had started an investigation. This news made her extremely worried, forcing her to quickly return home. She locked the ice cream shop and put up a temporarily closed sign. As she left, her face betrayed her nervousness, looking very different from her usual demeanor. Naturally, her worried expression caught the attention of nearby residents, who began to mock her as she crossed the street towards the bus stop. They saw her take out her phone to make a call before getting into a taxi. Then she went to the bank, withdrew all her money, and then purchased a plane ticket to Paris. However, she was never able to use this ticket. Austrian police were waiting for her at the airport. They were aware of the ticket she had purchased, but realized she had not checked in for her flight. Police issued a warrant for her arrest on Wednesday, June 8, 2011, after a search warrant was issued. Investigators believe the containers found in the basement belonged to her ice cream shop, but locating her became difficult since she had stopped using her mobile phone. Meanwhile, she remained in Vienna, took another taxi, and asked the driver to take her to northern Italy. She then traveled to the mountains and reached Basu, from where she continued on for another 6 kilometers to Talamadzu, where she decided to stay in a hotel for a few days. Before arriving, she asked the taxi driver to book a room for her because she couldn't do it herself. Later, the taxi driver saw her picture in the news and informed the police that he had driven her there. Unfortunately, by that time, it was already too late. In this city, Estebali stayed for one night before taking a train to Udine, which is 50 kilometers from Almaty. There, she met Ivan, a street artist who noticed her crying at a cafe and offered his help. When he approached her to ask if she needed help, she told him about her problems, especially her husband's cruelty that forced her to leave home. Ivan invited her to stay in his apartment for a few days. She agreed, and he offered her the couch while he slept in his bed. During her stay, Estabelas helped Ivan with cleaning, shopping, and cooking, and everything seemed fine until he discovered her identity through a newspaper article. This revelation shocked and frightened he. He asked her to leave immediately, admitting that he knew she was evading the law. She denied his accusations. He then went to the nearest police station to inform them that Estebales, a woman wanted by the authorities, was in his home. Ivan was surprised to find Estebales waiting for the police at his house. She did not resist arrest. She was taken into custody as the primary suspect in several murders. She was arrested on June 10, 2011 at 7:30 a.m. in Udine, Italy. After her arrest, Estabelas was taken to the police station for questioning, where she confessed to 2 murders, one in 2008 and another in 2010. She used the same methods for both crimes, but claimed that the second murder was executed more skillfully. Meanwhile, Austrian authorities quickly requested her extradition while in Italy. Forensic experts identified the second victim as Manfred Hinterberger. During her interrogation, she attempted to justify her actions, saying that both men, Holger and Manfred, had subjected her to violence and cruelty. She felt very angry about the way they treated her. She described the murders as a response to the physical and psychological abuse she had suffered. Estebelas admitted that she had attacked Holger and Manfred on the head, then used an electric saw. She told investigators that she killed the first man, Holger, to improve her skills. She took shooting lessons and take a course on how to work with cement to prepare for the second murder, Manfred. At the time of her arrest in Italy, she was pregnant with Ronald's child, and during a medical examination, it was revealed that she was 2 months along. 14 days after her arrest, on June 24, 2011, Estebales was extradited by an Austrian court and detained on suspicion of involvement in 2 murders. Her lawyer argued that although police testimony is considered legal evidence under Italian law, Austrian law is very different. He asked that it not be admitted as evidence in her case. He said he planned to sue several Austrian tabloids for making the accusations against her. Estebales was arrested and held in a prison in Vienna until January 11, 2012, when she was taken to the hospital to give birth. After her son was born, he was immediately given to his father. From the start of the trial, Estebales admitted her guilt, while the prosecution and psychiatrists portrayed her as a ruthless, manipulative, and selfish individual. Despite being educated and fluent in 3 languages, she committed extreme acts for her own benefit. The defense argued that Estebales was a victim of her own emotions. They claimed she was under the influence of illegal drugs and prescribed medications, stating she took 5 different drugs 3 times a day, including antidepressants and treatments for schizophrenia. However, evidence showed that her actions were intentional. She testified that Manfred pressured her to undergo numerous cosmetic surgeries, including nose jobs and Botox, and forced her to exercise constantly to maintain her figure, despite her long 12-hour shifts at the ice cream parlor. Estebal is alleged that people mocked her, which became unbearable for her and ultimately led to her decision to kill Manfred. The psychiatrist explained that she simply didn't know how to reject men who made her unhappy. She resorted to an extreme solution. She believed the easiest way to deal with men who were no longer needed was to kill them. Whenever men brought her trouble or ridiculed her, she concluded that killing them was the best option. On November 22, 2012, Estebalis Carranza was found guilty of murdering Holger Holtz in 2008 and Manfred Hinterberger in 2010. She was sentenced to life imprisonment in a facility for the criminally insane. Along with her attorneys, she appealed the decision, but the sentence was upheld by the Higher Regional Court of Vienna on March 20, 2013. In November 2017, it was announced that Estebalis would be transferred from a women's prison in Lower Austria to a prison in the market town of Upper Austria. She was diagnosed with a serious personality disorder. She exhibited abnormal behavior and had a mindset akin to a princess seeking rescue from a prince, longing for a fictional world where she was the center of attention. At the time of her crime, Estebalis was mentally stable, as she was not under the influence of drugs and was fully aware of her actions. Psychiatrists expressed concern that she might commit serious crimes again after her release. During a psychiatric evaluation, she stated, "Some part of her brain is red, and when it activates, she can't control myself." Michelle Bright was born on June 2, 1981 in a small Australian town called Goolgong. With a population of around 2,500 people, this quiet, close-knit community was far removed from big cities. Everyone knew each other, and because of its remote location, outsiders rarely passed through. Michelle lived there with her parents and two older brothers. She attended the local school where she had many friends, played basketball, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her love for animals was so strong that she even had her own horse. On top of that, wanted to have a big family of her own one day with 6 kids. By 1999, when she was 17, Michelle was focused on her studies. She aimed for top grades, hoping that it would make it easier for her to get into vet school. On February 26th, Michelle was planning to attend her friend's birthday party. The plan was to gather at her friend's house, and afterwards, intended to spend the night at another friend's place since her home was quite a distance away. That evening, Michelle's mom drove her to the party because Michelle didn't have a car of her own. Before getting out of the car, Michelle said she'd see her mom the next morning, and they said their goodbyes. The next day, when Michelle's mom woke up, she noticed that her daughter still wasn't home. At first, she assumed Michelle was sleeping in late at her friend's place, but as the hours passed, her worry began to grow. Michelle didn't have a cell phone, so around noon, her mom started calling her friends to check on her. Eventually, she learned that Michelle had left the party around 12:30 a.m. with a couple who offered to drop her off in the town center. From there, Michelle only had a short walk to her other friend's house. But to her mom's surprise, she found out that Michelle never made it there. The realization deepened her concern. Hoping that maybe Michelle had decided to stay with someone else, she continued calling her friends, but all of them said they hadn't seen Michelle that night. By the time Michelle's mom had contacted all of her daughter's friends, several hours had passed, and she still hadn't found any trace of her. With no other options left, she decided to go to the police, but she quickly ran into a problem. The local officers assumed Michelle was either out with friends or had run away from home, so they refused to start a search. Despite her best efforts to convince them that Michelle would never just run away from home like that, the officers wouldn't budge. Left with no choice, Michelle's mom, along with other family members, started searching on their own. They spoke with townspeople and walked the streets, but there were no signs of Michelle anywhere. This went on for several days, until March 2nd. That evening, a man was out walking his dog along a road leading out of town. As he passed by an old railway near a field, something odd caught his eye in the tall grass. When he got closer, he realized it was a human body and called the police. The officers immediately recognized the victim as Michelle Bright. Her clothing was partially missing and her bra had been torn off. Michelle's bag was found near her body, but there were no other clues at the scene. What stood out was how close the body was to Michelle's home, only about half a mile away, but because of the tall grass, it was nearly impossible to spot from a distance. The medical examiner found several bruises on Michelle's body and determined that she had been strangled. They also concluded that she had been assaulted, but no biological evidence from the attacker was discovered. In her hand, they found a few strands of hair, but unfortunately, they couldn't extract a DNA sample from them either. Now that the police were dealing with a murder, they finally began their investigation. Their first step was to interview everyone who had attended the party. According to experts, the time of death was likely the same night she disappeared, meaning someone at the party might have been involved or at least knew something. Everyone claimed that the party was peaceful and without any conflicts. No one saw Michelle arguing or fighting with anyone. She was in good spirits and left with a couple who had offered her a ride. The police spoke with this couple and they confirmed that they dropped Michelle off on the main street in town where she planned to walk to her friend's house. After that, they drove off and didn't see which direction she went. Her friend told investigators that Michelle never made it to her place that night. The investigators suspected that either she was attacked before she could reach her friend's house or for some reason, Michelle changed her mind and decided to head home instead. The investigators doubted that the victim could have been attacked in the middle of the street. They interviewed everyone who lived nearby, and no one heard any screams or unusual noises. Because of this, the police believe that Michelle might have known her attacker. It's possible he offered her a ride home and instead drove her to the location where her body would later be found. Michelle's family also insisted that she would never have gotten into a car with a stranger. Besides, in their small town, outsiders were rare, so she would have recognized anyone local. Over the next few weeks, the police continued questioning various people, trying to find witnesses or any leads. They also started looking at potential suspects, asking for their DNA samples. Even though the experts couldn't obtain a DNA sample from the killer, this information wasn't made public. The investigators hoped that as DNA analysis technology advanced, they might be able to extract a genetic profile of the perpetrator from the victim's belongings or another evidence. One of the first suspects was Michelle's ex-boyfriend. The police found out that she had broken up with him shortly before her death, and according to their friends, he wasn't happy about it. But there was no evidence against him, and investigators couldn't determine whether he had the opportunity to be on the street where Michelle was walking the night she was killed. Another local resident raised suspicion because he seemed overly distraught about Michelle's death, even though they barely knew each other. But like with her ex-boyfriend, there was no way to connect this man to the murderer. Interestingly, a few days after the body was found, one of Michelle's relatives visited the site. He noticed one of her earrings on the ground, which was strange because the police had already searched the entire area. Either they missed the shiny piece of jewelry or the killer had taken it with them initially, and later decided to return it to the scene to dispose of the evidence. Over the next few months, investigators compiled a list of 14 suspects, but they struggled to connect any of them to the crime. Without a DNA sample from the killer or other significant evidence, finding the culprit seemed like an almost impossible task. All the suspects voluntarily provided their DNA samples except for one. A 23-year-old man named Mark refused to give a sample, which made the investigators take a closer look at him. Shortly after Michelle's death, it came to light that Mark had been stalking a local woman for 8 months, even breaking into her home. Later, he was accused of harassing another woman in a nearby town. He followed her down the street, then caught up to her and started touching her. Although there wasn't enough evidence to charge him in that case, it gave the investigators in Michelle's case even more reason to be suspicious. They also discovered that Mark had been in the same class as Michelle's older brother, which meant he could have known her family well. Mark claimed that he was indeed in the town center that evening, but got home around 1:15 a.m., meaning he wouldn't have had enough time to kidnap Michelle, drive her to that field, and kill her. However, when investigators spoke with his wife, they found out something interesting. She said she wasn't sure about the time and suggested that he might have come home much later. This prompted the police to install a wiretap in Mark's house, which led to another alarming discovery. It turned out that his wife also had doubts about his honesty and had repeatedly questioned him about whether he was involved in the murder. Eventually, she convinced Mark to provide a DNA sample, But just a day before his meeting with the police, he crashed his car into a tree. Investigators suspected it might have been intentional, but a few days later, Mark did hand over his DNA sample after all. Despite his suspicious behavior, the investigators still lacked the killer's DNA, and without it or any other solid evidence, they couldn't arrest Mark. Since then, the case saw almost no progress. The police continued to investigate various suspects, but nothing led to any breakthroughs. About a year after the murder, Michelle's family decided to move to another city. They were convinced that the killer was someone local, and it became too difficult for them to stay among people they suspected. In 2000, a substantial reward of $100,000 was offered for any information leading to the capture of the culprit. This brought in several new leads, but all of them ended up going nowhere. In 2002, investigators traveled to the UK to analyze the victim's belongings and other evidence for any foreign DNA, but this too yielded no results. The case was reopened several times over the years. In 2009, the reward was increased to $500,000, setting a record for the state. This huge amount of money generated a flood of new tips and calls, but none of them brought investigators any closer to catching the killer. In 2019, 20 years after the murder, the case was reopened once again. The police still didn't have the killer's DNA, as even with modern tools, they couldn't find any foreign DNA on the victim's belongings. Given this, detectives turned their attention back to the list of suspects, which at that point had 5 names. After thoroughly re-examining each of these men, they narrowed the list down to just 2 suspects and focused their efforts on them. One of them was a 56-year-old man named Craig. He became a suspect for several reasons. At the time of Michelle's murder, he lived just 2 houses away from her. What's more, Craig moved to Sydney just 2 weeks after the crime. Craig also had a significant criminal record. He had been arrested multiple times for harassment, indecent exposure, and other similar offenses. On top of that, he was involved in various illegal activities like thefts. Moreover, Craig had been a suspect in another assault case involving a woman from Galgong just a year before Michelle's death. In that incident, the woman had returned home after a party and was sitting on her porch, waiting for her boyfriend to arrive. At some point, a man, later identified as Craig, approached her, struck her, and attempted to assault her. Fortunately, her boyfriend arrived just in time, scaring off the attacker. Although the woman initially reported the assault to the police, she ultimately decided not to press charges. The problem was that the chances of securing a conviction against Craig were low, as her testimony alone wouldn't have been enough. As a result, no charges were filed and Craig remained free. For the investigators working on Michelle's case, Craig was their prime suspect, but they needed a confession from him. So the detectives decided to take a bold and risky step. They planned a large-scale undercover operation. Given Craig's criminal history, the investigators decided to set up a sting operation. They created a fake criminal group and approached Craig, presenting themselves as an organization with serious connections, including ties to the police. They also claimed that they were looking to make a lot of money and needed one more member. Craig was intrigued by the offer and joined the gang. Over the next few months, the undercover operatives focused on gaining his trust. They kept telling him that their group was like family, and if he couldn't be fully trusted, he wouldn't be involved in the major operations. During this period, the group committed a series of crimes, but the police didn't reveal any specific details. It's possible that these crimes were staged or involved minor thefts, with the detectives willing to go to such lengths to solve the murder case. This continued for almost a year, and the investigators decided it was time to move to the next phase. The gang members told Craig that the police were interested in him because of some old murder, which threatened their entire operation. They didn't provide any details, but implied that investigators were getting closer. During one of these conversations, said, "I hope they won't question me about the murder of Michelle Bright." He then added that she was like a sister to him and that he had known her since she was a baby. Sometime later, another undercover officer posing as a corrupt detective working for the gang met with Craig. He told him that investigators from a small town were actively digging into him regarding the old murder and that they were closing in. Eventually, the detectives moved to the third step. They held a press conference announcing a record-breaking reward of $1 million for information about Michelle's murder. This was done to ensure the case made headlines across Australia and to increase Craig's anxiety. Interestingly, on the same day, Craig left a comment on the police department's social media post saying, "It's so sad that they haven't caught our killer. Michelle was like a sister to me. I feel sorry for the family." The next day was set up to meet with the gang leader, whom he had never seen in person. The role of the gang leader was played by one of the investigators. The fake boss told Craig that the police were interested in him for 2 separate cases, putting the entire gang at risk. He asked Craig to be completely honest and confess if he was involved. In return, he promised to help Craig resolve the situation. But despite this, Craig continued to deny any involvement in the murder. During the conversation, the fake boss showed him a folder with police materials on Michelle's case, including a photo of Craig's old car. In 1999, shortly after Craig's move to Sydney, the police had contacted him by phone regarding the investigation, and the next day, his car was found burned. The boss claimed they had some evidence and that Craig could be arrested very soon. The police material seemed to have had their effect, and Craig finally began to confess. He recounted that on the night of the murder, he had arrived in Galgong, visited a friend, and then headed to the town center, where he stopped by a bar and talked to its owner. He said he thought he left his car there and walked away, but he couldn't remember much beyond that because he had drunk a lot of alcohol. However, Craig admitted that he did indeed kill Michelle. He recalled taking her life. Realizing that such a vague confession wouldn't be enough, the fake boss proposed that Craig go to the crime scene with other gang members to refresh his memory. After that, his accomplices would take him to the airport and help him leave the country. Craig agreed, and once at the crime scene, he told how he dragged Michelle away from the road into some grass to hide her body. He added that he couldn't remember if he had assaulted her, but he detailed how he removed part of her clothing. He noted that the clasp on her bra was broken, an undisclosed detail that only the killer would have known. After that, Craig also confessed to attempting to assault another woman a year before Michelle's murder, but was interrupted by the victim's boyfriend. He described the incident in detail, providing information that confirmed the truthfulness of his account. After receiving the confession, the gang members did take Craig to the airport, but reinforcements were already waiting for him there. 20 years after the murder, Craig was arrested for Michelle's killing and was placed in jail awaiting trial. The trial began in 2023, with Craig facing charges for both Michelle's murder and the attempted assault on the other woman. He pleaded not guilty, and his lawyer argued that the confession had been obtained under pressure. The defense highlighted that Craig initially claimed his innocence to the undercover officers, and only made a false confession out of fear for his safety. The prosecution, however, argued that Craig had always had a choice. He could have left the gang and remained silent about his involvement in the murder. Additionally, Craig had provided specific details, such as the manner of the killing and the broken clasp on Michelle's bra, which an innocent person would not have known. The prosecution's theory was that Craig had spotted Michelle on one of the central streets and either offered her a ride or walked her home. Given that she lived just yards away from Craig and knew him well, she might have agreed. Once they reached the outskirts of town, Craig could have attacked her and dragged her away from the road towards the railroad tracks, where her body was eventually discovered. The trial lasted for 7 weeks, and Craig was ultimately found guilty of Michelle's murder and the assault on the other woman. The victim testified in court and once again identified him, but this time she didn't have to worry about him evading justice. The judge sentenced Craig to 32 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 24 years. This means he could be released when he is 77 or older. Michelle's relatives, who had long lost hope for justice, thanked the detectives for their tireless efforts in uncovering the truth. The tragedy had forever changed their family. 6 years after Michelle's death, her parents divorced, and her mother struggled to live without her daughter. Her father and brothers could not stop blaming themselves, believing it was their duty to protect her. Now, they can find some solace in knowing that the murderer will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. The case of Daniela Tabares. Daniela Tabares was born on May 8, 1998, in Cali, Colombia. She is the only child of Isabel Tabares, a single mother. Daniela did not know her father and had never met him. Their life was not easy. Her mother raised her alone. She lived with her mother, her grandfather, and her maternal uncle, who supported the family during difficult times. For many years, Isabel worked at a bank and saved some money. However, in 2010, when Daniela was 12 years old, Isabel was laid off from the bank and had difficulty finding a new job. To solve her financial problems, Isabel decides to use her savings for a trip to Florida, USA, where she believes there are more opportunities. However, she realized her savings were insufficient for the journey, so she borrowed money from several neighbors, promising to repay them once she secured a job in the United States. Isabel received support from her two older sisters, who had settled in the United States. They invited her to live with them and share the rent, helping her not to worry about housing. While Daniela attended school, Isabel began working as a cleaner. She was very determined and hardworking, with the desire to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Her sisters also helped her by sharing advice on how to succeed in America. Isabel realized that in order to become independent, she needed to be self-sufficient and start her own business. Within a year, she saved enough money to obtain a license and start her own business. Although she had to work hard, she always prioritized her daughter, Daniela, whom she loved the most. At the same time, Daniela attended Coral Springs High School in Florida. As a sociable girl, she easily made friends with many people. Initially, she was close to fellow students who were also immigrants, as they had much in common. After that, she made friends with many others. It seemed that everything was going well. Isabel quickly paid off her debt to her neighbors. She even started considering renting her own apartment to avoid burdening her sisters. She took her time to save more money and regain her stability. She successfully carried out her plans. Her small business grew and began generating income. She worked hard and her efforts paid off. During this time, she met Shu, a Colombian with two children. They quickly understood each other because they had both gone through hardships after moving to the United States. Besides, Isabel also learned about the culture of a new country, expanded her business, and increased her knowledge. Isabel and Daniela often did everything together and supported each other. Isabel credits their close relationship as one of the key factors in her success. Daniela is a sociable, kind girl and makes friends easily, which helps her have no trouble living in the United States. However, she was concerned about gaining weight during her teenage years. Instead of giving up, she was determined to overcome her problems. She started exercising and living a healthy lifestyle, avoiding fast food. These daily habits helped her achieve her ideal figure. Daniela's achievements inspired Isabel, and she decided to join a sports club near their home in Coral Springs. By that time, Daniela had been attending the club for a while. Seeing her daughter's perfect figure, Isabel also wanted to take better care of herself. However, she was very busy with her business, which took a lot of energy. After a few months, she was so tired that she refused to go to the gym. She plans to return to the gym later, but for now, she decided to prioritize her business. Daniela, on the other hand, decided to continue training. She was very happy with the changes in her body and figure that she had achieved. Even though her mother didn't go to practice with her, she had enough friends in the club to train with during most sessions. One of them was Carolina Miller, a 40-year-old woman whom Daniela met during training. They quickly found harmony and started training together in 2017. Despite facing challenges like migration and a language barrier, Daniela graduated from high school, proving that she could overcome difficulties and was ready to fight for her future. Furthermore, she wants to pursue higher education, but she needs financial support. Her mother's business wasn't enough to cover her college expenses, so she took a job as a switchboard operator at a gym where she trained for many years. At the same time, she also learned about criminology, a field she was very passionate about and dreamed of building a career in. By 2019, at the age of 21, she was able to become independent. She was in her prime and busy planning for the future. Daniela enrolled at a local university to pursue her education and achieve her dreams. She transformed from a shy schoolgirl into a confident young woman. She was not only attractive and charming, but also passionate about her job at the fitness club. Her enthusiasm caught the attention of the owners of the sports complex, and they offered her a position in the gym. She became a coach, encouraging people to participate in sports and supporting beginners. Her main goal was to inspire others, and she worked with many different groups, sharing her passion. She also organized weekly group activities to promote teamwork and camaraderie within the sports organization. Daniela then met Yvonne Serrano, a woman of Panamanian descent. An active individual, Yvonne enjoyed sports and had never experienced any legal or substance abuse problems. She was generally considered a respectable person and avoided dangerous relationships. However, she lived in a troubled neighborhood, so she purchased several registered firearms for self-defense. By 2019, Yvonne decided to invest more in sports and joined inspirational classes taught by Daniela. However, due to frequent travel and the difficulty of making friends, she felt different from the other participants. Although she seemed unapproachable and a bit withdrawn, she always attended all the classes and was determined to change her life. On the evening of November 22nd, 2019, Daniela and her group planned to go to the movies and then return home. However, they decided to change their plans and go to a local bar called World of Bear in Coconut Creek after the screening. Since Daniela had worked to finish the next day, she did not want to stay at the bar for long. During the night, she called her mother, Isabel, several times. Isabel was worried about her daughter going to the bar because she thought it was unsafe. Daniela reassured her mother that she would not be drinking and would only stay for a short time, planning to return home around 1 a.m. The group eventually met at the bar in hopes of having a fun evening. After some time, Daniela's friend Carolina approached Yvonne and advised her that she had had too much to drink. Yvonne was sitting outside, holding hands with some strange young men. Carolina suggested that Yvonne join the group inside the bar, but this made her uncomfortable, and she became angry and shouted. When she returned inside, her behavior became more aggressive, and it was obvious she was intoxicated. Despite this, the evening was still going well, and Daniela lost track of time. Later that night, Daniela's mother, Isabel, sent her daughter a text message, expressing her concerns about potential dangers. Daniela replied that she would be home early. As the team leader, Daniela needs to oversee everything and make sure everyone gets home safely. Sensing that something was off, Isabel decided to wait for her daughter. She lay in bed, unable to sleep, waiting for Daniela to return. By 2 a.m., Daniela still had not come back from the bar, and Isabel's worry grew. Each time she saw car headlights outside, she got up to check, hoping to see Daniela in the driveway, but the cars just drove by. She texted her daughter again, but received no reply. Realizing it was too late to call Daniela's friends, she tried to reassure herself that her daughter was likely with a friend. She thought about the possible reasons why the girl was quiet. The phone was out of battery or the signal was bad, and finally convinced herself that everything was fine, then went to sleep. At 5:55 a.m., County Emergency Services received a distressing call. A woman reported seeing a lifeless girl in a parked car near her home. Several police officers quickly arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. They spoke with the witness, a 51-year-old named Yvonne Serrano. Meanwhile, at 6 a.m., Isabel woke up and noticed that Daniela had not yet returned home. She felt exhausted, having only slept for 3 to 4 hours, but she needed to prepare for work and clean the offices. Unable to reach Daniela, she called Carolina, hoping that her daughter had arrived at Carolina's house and was still asleep. However, Carolina replied that she did not know where Daniela was. She felt confident that Daniela would make it home safely, even if she had been drinking, because there were plenty of people nearby with cars who could help. However, Carolina can't stop thinking about the incident with Yvonne at the bar and wonders if it has anything to do with the current situation. To find out more about what happened after she left, she called her friends from the gym. She was shocked to learn that her group of friends had returned home and that no one knew anything about Daniela. Feeling guilty for leaving Daniela, Carolina decided to go to the police to report her missing. The officer on duty informed her that Daniela had already been found. At that moment, several police officers were at Isabel's house delivering the devastating news of her daughter's death. They spoke with Isabel to gather important details for the investigation. It was difficult to calm Isabel when she heard the news. She began to cry loudly and asked what had happened. Daniela was her only daughter, and in that moment, her world fell apart. Police then carefully inspected the girl's car that Yvonne reported, which was found near Isabel's house. Inside the vehicle, they discovered an ID card and a bag containing personal items. By checking the license plates, they identified the car's owner as 20-year-old Daniela Tabarez, who was found deceased inside the car. During her initial meeting with the police, Yvonne claimed she was on her way to the gym early that morning when she stumbled upon the car. She stated that she did not know Daniela. The officers then inquired about Yvonne's whereabouts the previous evening. She admitted that she had attended a party and had drunk excessively, even losing consciousness at the bar. She said that she had only woken up in the morning, lying in bed with no memory of the night, including how she had gotten home. Afterward, the police continued to analyze the evidence found in the car, but soon realized they needed more details. It was clear that Yvonne knew Daniela, prompting detectives to return to her for additional information. Unexpectedly, Yvonne's story changed. She now claimed that at 5:50 a.m., she woke up in the passenger seat of the car next to Daniela and saw her lifeless body in the driver's seat. Shocked by the discovery, Yvonne immediately called the police, admitting that she had previously lied for fear of being considered a suspect. The situation was devastating for everyone who knew Daniela, particularly her mother, Isabel. The Latin American community rallied together to raise funds for Isabel, and many local residents joined in to support her. Meanwhile, the police were conducting an investigation, which quickly indicated that Daniela had been murdered. Forensic experts discovered shell casings inside her car and collected several fingerprints from both the inside and outside of the vehicle for analysis. They were also awaiting the results of Daniela's autopsy, which would provide further insights. Police then began interviewing individuals who had been with Daniela that evening and collected CCTV footage from the bar where they had gathered. It was confirmed that Daniela had not had any conflicts. The night had gone smoothly. However, multiple witnesses reported that Yvonne had been drinking heavily and was very attached to the group at the bar. In contrast, Daniela chose not to drink that night to avoid any issues. A girl offered to drive her home, and Daniela accepted. Their movements were tracked to the parking lot exit at 1:30 a.m., where they left the nightclub calmly, as confirmed by the last person to see Daniela alive. The preliminary report from the medical examiner indicated that the death occurred around 2 a.m., which was the exact time when Yvonne left the bar to go home. By then, Yvonne had already become the main suspect in the murder. The police wanted to find out what she had been doing for the 4 hours before she reported the incident to them. They then found that she had been busy. She had deleted messages from her phone with Daniela, deleted the video from the front door camera, and changed clothes. She had also washed the outfit she had worn that night at the bar. It was clear that she was trying to cover up evidence of the crime. The police decided to arrest Yvonne Serrano and hold her in jail while they investigated further. Once the final results of the forensic examination were in, she was charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Despite the accusations, Yvonne has maintained her innocence and stood her ground. On November 27, 2019, Daniela Tabarez's funeral took place, attended by many people, including club members, friends, and family. All were deeply saddened by this tragedy. She was cremated in December. A few weeks after the crime, the district attorney's office decided to pursue lesser charges against Yvonne. It was believed that proving premeditation would be challenging, so the charge was classified as unintentional murder, which could result in a maximum of 30 years in prison. She could potentially receive bail before the hearing and be released by the Supreme Court, which upset Daniela's mother. Following these developments, progress on the case stalled for unclear reasons. By March 2020, Daniela's family became aware that the case was not receiving adequate investigation. There was limited evidence, and Yvonne might avoid punishment altogether. Friends and family organized social media campaigns and protests to raise public and media awareness of Daniela's death. They want Yvonne to be held accountable for her actions. One such protest occurred on March 4th, when Daniela's colleagues left the gym and marched to the court where the preliminary hearing was being held. They argued that Yvonne should not be granted bail during these proceedings. The prosecutor's office believes that she has a high possibility of absconding, so she is not allowed to go free while waiting for the next hearing. The lawyer requested that the judge set a low bail amount, no more than $1.40000, arguing that if Yvonne wore an ankle monitor, she would not be able to flee, and claimed that the prosecution had exaggerated the situation. Additionally, Yvonne would participate in a rehabilitation program and undergo a mental health assessment. Ultimately, the judge decided on a bail amount of $100,000, which was higher than the initial request before the trial took place. Yvonne must remain at a specialized rehabilitation center and is only allowed to leave to meet with her legal team. Yvonne later underwent a ballistics test, which confirmed that the bullet came from her weapon. Additionally, authorities gathered credible evidence showing attempts to destroy evidence after the crime, and she was captured on CCTV by neighbors. This information prompted the prosecutor's office to pursue charges of premeditated assault and murder. It was believed that an argument broke out between Yvonne and Daniela while they were in the car, leading to Yvonne's aggressive behavior. The prosecution successfully persuaded the jury, and on August 12, 2024, 56-years-old Yvonne Serrano was found guilty of premeditated murder. She received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Isabel had a tattoo inked on her shoulder in memory of her daughter, Daniela, as a reminder of her fight for justice. Unfortunately, the exact incident between Yvonne and Daniela in the car that night remain unclear. She has not admitted to the crime and has not explained her reasons for her actions. Lauren Astley was born on April 1, 1993 in the small town of Wayland, Massachusetts. She grew up in a loving family and was an only child. When she was 6, her parents decided to get a divorce, but her father stayed in the same town and remained very involved in her life. Once, Lauren and her dad traveled to New Orleans to help those affected by Hurricane Katrina. Even though she was quite young, Lauren pitched in alongside her father, working to clean up the mess left by the disaster. Since elementary school, Lauren was very active in sports. She started with soccer, but later discovered a passion for tennis, where she achieved some notable results. But her true love was singing. She joined the school's music group and began performing at various events with them. During high school, Lauren got a part-time job at a clothing store in a local mall. After graduation, she planned to attend college in North Carolina and wanted to save up some money before heading off. Lauren graduated from high school in the summer of 2011 at 18 years old. After finishing school, she spent most of her free time with her parents and friends. Knowing she'd soon be moving across the country, she wanted to make the most of her last few months at home. On the morning of July 3rd, Lauren headed to her shift at the mall, just like any other day. Beforehand, she had made plans to meet up with her friends right after work. They were expecting her to call. Around 6:30 p.m., finished her shift, said goodbye to her coworkers and left the mall. Her friends waited for her call, but for some reason, Lauren didn't reach out. They started sending her messages and trying to call her, but there was no response. This was unusual since they were always in touch with each other. At first, they thought Lauren was just busy and would call them back soon. Meanwhile, her father also began to worry. Lauren was supposed to stop by his place after work, but she never showed up. His calls went unanswered as well. A little later, he contacted Lauren's friends. When he learned that they hadn't seen or heard from her all evening, he decided to go to the police immediately. Their town was quite small, and Lauren's parents couldn't think of any place where she might have gone. The fact that she didn't meet up with her friends and wasn't answering any calls made them fear that something bad might have happened to her. The local police department quickly launched a search, and around the same time, Lauren's friends reported that one of them had spotted her car near a beach by a lake. Officers rushed to the scene and found Lauren's red Jeep. She wasn't inside, but her purse, phone, and laptop were, with the windows rolled down. This raised immediate concern for the police. Lauren's friends and family were adamant she would never leave her car like that with her belongings inside. Her father was frantic. He ran to the beach and waded into the water, thinking that his daughter might be there. The police searched the car but found no sign of a struggle, no blood, or any other clues. After that, they began combing the area around the beach, but there was no sign of Lauren. The only thing they discovered was her car keys, which were found in a nearby storm drain, as if someone had deliberately thrown them there. By this time, Lauren's friends had gathered near the beach, and detectives began questioning them. They mentioned that Lauren had an ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel, whom she had broken up with just a few months earlier. The friends also said that he had taken the breakup pretty hard, so the police decided to check on him. When asked if they thought Nathaniel could have harmed Lauren, her friends unanimously denied it. They insisted that Nathaniel loved Lauren and would never hurt her. Later that night, detectives went to talk to Nathaniel. He told them he had been home all evening. His mother backed up his story, adding that they had been watching movies together. With that, the police ruled him out as a suspect and shifted their focus to searching the area around the beach. Lauren's relatives, along with dozens of other town residents, joined in the search. Her friends stayed by her car all night, hoping for a miracle that she would eventually appear. That night, the police also examined Lauren's phone and they found something interesting. At 7:05 p.m., she had sent Nathaniel a message with just one word, "Here." 14 minutes before that, she had called him and they had talked for a few minutes. This was pretty suspicious, so detectives decided to visit Nathaniel once again. He admitted that Lauren had indeed stopped by around 7 p.m., but she hadn't come inside or even gotten out of her car. They talked for about 5 minutes, mostly about their relationship, and then she just left. He explained that this seemed unimportant at the time, which is why he didn't mention it earlier. Nathaniel appeared completely calm, and nothing about his behavior raised any red flags, so the police continued to investigate other potential leads. The search continued throughout the night until an early morning call came in to the police. A woman had gone for a bike ride along the road by the river. As she passed a small marsh, something strange caught her eye, and she stopped. Upon closer inspection, she realized it was a human body in the water and immediately called the police. When officers retrieved the body, they saw that it was Lauren Astley. It was also immediately clear that they were dealing with a murderer. A bungee cord was wrapped around her neck and there was a noticeable cut. The body was sent to medical examiners who confirmed that the cut, along with strangulation, was the cause of death. They also found numerous defensive wounds on her body, indicating that Lauren had fought back against her attacker. Meanwhile, the police searched the area around the marsh and discovered a blood-stained towel nearby, which was sent to the lab for DNA analysis. Now that the police were dealing with the murder, they turned their attention to finding the killer, and the only viable suspect at that point was Nathaniel. After speaking with Lauren's friends and family, they learned more details about their relationship and breakup. Lauren and Nathaniel had started dating 3 years earlier, and for most of that time, their relationship seemed perfect. Nathaniel came from a respectable family, played on the school football team, and was generally one of the most popular guys at their school. However, about 2 years into the relationship, things began to deteriorate. Nathaniel grew increasingly jealous, tried to control who Lauren spent time with, and even started drinking heavily. Lauren's friends noticed these issues and saw how they were taking a toll on her. They repeatedly advised her to consider ending the relationship. The couple would break up frequently, only to get back together again, but 3 months before Lauren's death, she decided to end things with Nathaniel for good. According to her friends, Nathaniel took the breakup very hard. He tried to persuade Lauren not to leave him, showing up to talk with her and calling frequently, but she was firm in her decision not to get back together. After the breakup, Nathaniel fell into a deep depression. He stopped leaving the house, cut off contact with his friends, and lost interest in football, which had always been his passion. Even though he had received a sports scholarship for college, he no longer cared about it. While sitting at home, Nathaniel began drinking and smoking. His mother eventually decided to take him to a therapist, and after a few sessions, the therapist suggested that Nathaniel might indeed be suffering from depression. Even though he had withdrawn from his social circle, Nathaniel continued trying to rekindle his relationship with Lauren. Once, Lauren and her friends organized a graduation party, which was attended by dozens of their classmates and their parents. Nathaniel showed up drunk and saw Lauren talking to other guys. He approached her and tried to discuss their relationship, but Lauren made it clear that she wasn't interested. Nathaniel became angry. There was a large tent set up in the yard where the party was held, and in his frustration, Nathaniel punched one of the tent's supports, causing the whole structure to start collapsing on the people inside. They had to hold it up, and Nathaniel was immediately asked to leave. After that, came to her mother in tears and told her that Nathaniel wouldn't leave her alone. In another incident, Nathaniel approached a guy Lauren was talking to and threatened to kill him. All these details led investigators to seriously consider that Nathaniel might be involved in Lauren's murder. He was the last person to speak with her and see her alive. However, the police still faced one major obstacle: his alibi provided by his mother. As the investigators dug deeper, they uncovered another interesting detail. Reviewing security footage from the mall where Lauren worked, they saw that Nathaniel had been there about an hour before her shift ended. Although he didn't approach Lauren, he did visit a sports nutrition store on the same floor. The police decided to visit Nathaniel again and talk about what they discovered, but this time, he wasn't at home. His parents told the officers that Nathaniel had left several hours earlier and they had no idea where he was. When investigators questioned his mother again about whether she was home the entire evening, this time she remembered that she had actually gone out briefly to run some errands. This just so happened to be around the time Lauren had visited Nathaniel after work. For the police, this meant that Nathaniel didn't have an alibi, making him the prime suspect. With all these facts coming together, the police obtained a warrant to search Nathaniel's home. Their first stop was the garage, where they immediately noticed several bungee cords, exactly like the one found around Lauren's neck. Using luminol, forensic experts discovered a large blood stain on the garage floor that had been cleaned and was invisible to the naked eye. Blood traces were also found on the door handle, the kitchen floor, and in 2 sinks. Soon after, investigators found a sports bag containing sneakers covered in blood and dirt. In Nathaniel's room, there was a small door leading to the attic where the police discovered another pair of blood-stained shoes along with wet, dirty clothes. The detective sent all these items to the lab, and the results quickly confirmed that the blood belonged to Lauren. The police immediately began searching for Nathaniel, and just a few hours later, they found him at his aunt's house. During the arrest, Nathaniel did not resist and remained calm. He was brought in for interrogation, but his parents quickly hired a lawyer, so the detectives were unable to get a confession. Nathaniel was charged with murder, and the case was handed over to the court. While preparing for the trial, investigators uncovered even more troubling details. Nathaniel's cousin, with whom he was staying at the time of his arrest, revealed that on the night of Lauren's murder, Nathaniel had called her, asking to hang out to clear his head. Although she was busy, they met the next day, around the same time news of the body being found had spread through the town. When his cousin asked if he had any connection to the murder, Nathaniel's response was chilling. He said, "They'll never find the murder weapon if that's what you mean." He then admitted to driving Lauren's car to the beach. Another disturbing discovery was that Lauren had agreed to meet with Nathaniel that evening, only because his mother had come to her workplace asking her to talk to him. She was worried about her son and hoped that a conversation with Lauren might help him deal with the breakup, never imagining the tragic outcome that would follow. While Nathaniel was in jail without bail, his lawyer announced plans to seek a not guilty verdict. Although he did not deny that his client committed the murder, he argued that Nathaniel was in a state of mental breakdown at the time and should not be held accountable for his actions. If the court accepted the lawyer's argument, Nathaniel could face several years of mandatory treatment, after which he might be released. The trial began on February 13, 2013, a year and a half after the murder. The prosecution presented their case, arguing that Nathaniel not only understood the severity of his actions but had premeditated the murder. According to their version, Nathaniel had arranged to meet Lauren after her shift when his parents would be away. Detectives also found that he instructed Lauren not to park at his house, but to leave her car on a nearby street. Once Lauren arrived at his home, he led her to the garage, where he stabbed her multiple times and strangled her. He then drove her Jeep to the beach, discarded the keys in a storm drain, and returned home on foot. Nathaniel then loaded Lauren's body into the trunk of his car and drove it to the swamp, where he dumped the body in the water. Afterward, he went home to clean up the bloodstains. Notably, police found a witness who had seen Nathaniel that evening. Based on the timing, the witness saw him returning home from the swamp. He was shirtless and loud music was playing from his car. Nathaniel's lawyer did not deny that he had killed Lauren. However, the defense argued that the murder resulted from a temporary psychotic episode, claiming that Nathaniel was unable to control his actions. Several experts testified that Nathaniel had a family history of schizophrenia, which might have contributed to his condition. They also noted his involvement in football, where he had regularly received strikes to the head. They also argued that Nathaniel suffered from depression, which impaired his ability to understand his actions. Nathaniel himself told psychologists that during the murder, it felt as though he was not in his own body and couldn't control anything. The prosecution, however, insisted that these theories did not align with the evidence. They argued that Nathaniel lured Lauren to his home, killed her over a period of several minutes, then disposed of her car, transported her body, cleaned up the blood, and hid his clothing. The sequence of actions suggested a well-planned crime rather than a sudden, short-lived episode. Ultimately, the jury found Nathaniel guilty of the murder, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was announced, Lauren's father did something unexpected. He approached Nathaniel's parents and hugged them. He later explained that, on that day, they too had lost their child. Following the trial, Lauren's father established a foundation in her memory aimed at preventing similar tragedies. The foundation focuses on promoting educational initiatives to raise awareness among teenagers about the dangers of unhealthy relationships and the unacceptable nature of violence in any form. One more thing worth mentioning is that in 2021, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals under 20 cannot be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Since Nathaniel was exactly 20 at the time of his sentencing, he might theoretically be able to apply for parole in the future, though there have been no developments in that direction yet. Lauren's parents took this decision very badly. Her mother stated that since Nathaniel took their daughter's life, he should not have the right to live his own and should remain behind bars for the rest of his life. The case of Maria Kidabe. In 2003, Dr. Paul Jarrett was 82 years old. Despite his age, he remained strong and healthy. He was a respected psychiatry professor well known in the area. From a young age, he aspired to succeed in this field. He pursued education, secured a job at a clinic, and eventually, after gaining experience, opened his own practice. His successful career allowed him to buy his dream house and enjoy a comfortable life for many years. Paul lived there with his wife and their 4 children, Paul Jr., Greg, Aletta, and Mark. Together, they built a happy life into their later years. In 2002, the family faced a tragedy when his beloved wife passed away. It was a significant loss for Paul, but he persevered. He planned to continue working at his clinic as long as he was able. His calm and balanced personality drew people to him. By 2003, Paul was still running his private practice and had a close relationship with his youngest son, Greg. Greg visits and takes care of him often. They go fishing and run marathons together. Greg followed in his father's footsteps and became a doctor. He was working at a hospital in Miami while also pursuing further medical education. Before he moved to live with his father, Greg married his assistant at the clinic and they had a child together. However, his marriage did not last. A few years after their child's birth, he divorced his wife and returned to care for his father, who required support and attention. Although Greg's father was cheerful and desired an active life, he needed assistance in his old age, and Greg was willing to help him. On July 16, 2003, Greg did not show up for work. He was expected at the hospital by 7 a.m. to work until 3:30 p.m., but even by 7:30 a.m., he still hadn't arrived. This concerned his colleagues since he was known for his punctuality and responsibility. They attempted to contact him by phone, but he did not answer. At that time, Greg was dating a nurse named Monica. His colleagues reached out to her to find out about Greg's whereabouts, but she informed them that she had not seen him since the previous evening when he left to go home and take care of his father. They attempted to call Paul, the father of the missing doctor, but he didn't answer his phone. Next, they contacted the Paul workplace, where his assistant informed them that Paul hadn't shown up there either. She didn't know his whereabouts and mentioned that her calls to him were also unanswered. This situation was increasingly worrying. Concerned, Monica decided to visit Paul's home to investigate further, fearing that, given his age, he might have had an accident and could require assistance. When she got to the house, she immediately saw that Paul's car was gone from the driveway. There were no other signs of alarm. She knocked on the door, but it was locked. Monica walked inside. The house was messy and quiet. Feeling uneasy and afraid that there might be a robber inside, she did not dare to go any further. She called 911 to report Paul missing. The dispatcher found the situation suspicious, suspecting that a crime might be committed. Monica agreed and decided to wait for the police to arrive. When the officers arrived, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside, they found Paul Jarrett lying lifeless on the floor, having been shot in the head. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting he was likely shot while asleep and died instantly. During their initial inspection, officers noticed black spots around the gunshot wounds and on the bed linen, indicating traces of gunpowder gases that had burned his skin. It was clear that the attacker was very close to Paul when he was shot. In the next room, Greg was found, and his death was far from peaceful. The noise of the shooting likely woke him up. He got up to investigate and encountered the attacker. There were probably 2 criminals involved. Greg was shot 4 times. He attempted to defend himself, first attacking the shooter, but was immediately wounded in the arms. Realizing he was outmatched, he tried to escape, prompting the criminal to shoot wildly. The police found several bullet holes in the walls. Furniture in the rooms was overturned, and items from shelves were scattered on the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. Typically, thieves target houses when the owners are absent, but sometimes they encounter them. If the criminals have a weapon, they might use it to eliminate unwanted witnesses. However, in this case, the victims were intentionally targeted. Paul was clearly killed in his sleep and never saw the criminals' faces, posing no threat to them. Greg was also asleep during the invasion, and if the intruders hadn't made noise with gunfire, he wouldn't have been a problem for them. Robbers do not usually act this way. They only open fire if the homeowner spots them during the robbery and recognizes them. The police soon realized that the attackers had come with the intention of killing, and that the rearrangement of the furniture was just a setup to throw the investigation off track. Furthermore, the locks showed no signs of damage, suggesting that the perpetrator knew the victims, either breaking into the house or being let involuntarily. The presence of numerous visible valuables and cash left untouched in the house suggested it wasn't a typical robbery, as a real thief would have likely taken them. It's possible the criminal was targeting specific valuables, but that's just speculation. Many neighbors later described the area as peaceful, safe, and where incidents were rare. The deceased had good relationships with neighbors and apparently had no enemies. Typically, Paul, like many residents, didn't lock his doors, trusting those around him as friends, not foes. Paul was well liked by his neighbors and was a respected physician. Police could not determine a specific motive for the crime. Strangely, Paul's car was missing, as was a gun in Greg's safe. Greg had a weapon for self-defense, but ballistics tests showed that the men had been shot with different guns. None of the neighbors heard the gunshots, which was highly unusual, suggesting the use of a silencer. Although there were several small houses near the Paul house, no one saw anything unusual. Forensic experts had not found any useful evidence in the house. Paul's car was found about 20 kilometers from the crime scene. The car was reported missing. The doctor's car was left in a parking lot near a dry cleaner's, with the doors unlocked and the keys still in the ignition as if the criminal had expected it to be stolen. Fortunately, police found the car. After a thorough examination, forensic scientists could not find any DNA or fingerprints inside. The criminal wore gloves or wiped away any traces. There was nothing in the surveillance footage. The killer acted professionally and avoided being caught on camera. With no leads, the police were left with limited resources. The police had nothing left but to start checking the immediate surroundings of the doctors in search of suspects. The first person they focused on was Monica, who had called 911. Although she had done the right thing by notifying the police and not entering the house herself, police questioned whether she knew what she would find inside and deliberately avoided going inside. After reviewing the evidence, they determined that Monica had no motive for Greg and Paul's deaths and had actually suffered a loss because she and Greg are dating and are getting ready to get married. And Monica had a verified alibi and were eliminated as suspects. Likewise, Greg's ex-wife also had an alibi and was not considered a suspect. The investigation then focused on his father, Paul Jarrett, a renowned psychiatrist. Although he could have difficult clients and everyone was in a bad mood from time to time, people with problems could easily be hurt, leading to resentment. However, Dr. Paul's practice was impeccable. He was highly regarded by his colleagues and patients, and no dissatisfied clients were found. While police were investigating various leads, searches continued at the victims' homes. A forensic scientist found the letter from a credit union addressed to Paul, sent shortly before his death. The letter alerted him to some suspicious transactions on his bank account, which caught the attention of the police. They discovered that access to Paul's account had been granted to his trusted assistant Maria Katabi. This raised suspicions about her potential involvement in the tragedy. Police learned that Maria had repeatedly attempted to cash counterfeit checks at banks involving the embezzlement of tens of thousands of dollars. However, despite her persistence, the credit union did not approve the fraudulent transactions. Maria had no problem with her salary. She earned a lot of money and Paul appreciated her work. However, it appeared that she had been stealing money from him, which was discovered by a strange coincidence. Just a few days later, Paul was found dead in his home, making it seem as if Maria had a strong motive for the crime. Maria, therefore, became the prime suspect. She was summoned to the police station to discuss the use of her boss's money. Maria denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that there was no reason to kill Paul, as they had long since settled all their financial issues. A reliable employee reported that Paul caught Maria writing several counterfeit checks. She was struggling financially and had informed her boss about these issues. The assistant felt that resorting to illegal actions was her only option. Paul and Maria had worked together for many years and he had grown very fond of her, trusting her completely. As a result, according to Maria, he forgave her financial fraud and they continued to work together. Maria indeed had confirmed financial troubles, including tax issues, and to her property. She was going through a divorce. Given these problems, Paul felt sympathetic towards her and did not plan to terminate her employment. During the investigation, it was found that Maria had stolen $100,000 from Paul. He trusted her so much that he didn't scrutinize her financial dealings. The last transaction she made was for $9,000. It was not possible to prove any involvement of the Maria in what happened. Maria had no other motive for any criminal acts and had a confirmed alibi for the incident, as did other possible suspects. Ultimately, the police reached a dead end and had to remove Maria from the suspect list. For many months, the case made no progress. Police repeatedly reviewed all the evidence but found no clues. Maria was the only possible motive, but her alibi excluded her as a suspect. Ultimately, police was waiting for the attacker to slip up in some way. They needed something concrete like a murder weapon. The only forensic evidence was a few shell casings. Police hoped the killer would use their weapon again, making it possible to catch them. However, if the criminal was clever, they likely disposed of the gun used in the double murder. In such a case, police needed to wait for them to use a stolen gun. They constantly monitored news reports, focusing on gun-related crimes. The strategy was clear. All they could do was wait. The toughest time was for Alette Jarrett, the daughter of the Paul. For months after her father and brother were shot, she returned to their home. In the Paul family, she was left alone. Paul and Greg were gone. Alette, grieving and alone, came to a house where she had lost her loved ones. an older brother who was killed, another family member who died after stopping NMI substances, and a third who died in a car accident. She didn't intend to stay long in the house, as its gloomy atmosphere was overwhelming. Her goal was to create a memorial video and gather the belongings of her relatives, because the house was scheduled for demolition. Alette began recording, wanting to walk through the rooms one last time to remember the happy years when her loved ones were still alive. It reminded her of the day Paul died. She walked through the rooms, collecting items that were precious to her and had been left untouched for months. Among these was her father's jacket. While checking the pockets, she discovered a letter from her father's assistant, Maria Katabi. In the letter, Maria apologized profusely to her boss and elaborated on her family issues, struggles with redeeming the house, and tax debts. She confessed to embezzlement and promised to return the money once her problems were resolved. Alette turned to the police for help. They had several questions about the letter. They wondered why Maria wrote an apology letter if she claimed she and Paul were involved. It was clear she was lying about the boss knowing about her financial fraud. During the first interrogation, Maria didn't mention the letter, so the police asked her to come to the station again to explain. Maria, a trusted employee, admitted she had forgotten about the note. She explained that she was initially afraid to admit the embezzlement, fearing the boss would fire her. So she decided to write a confession letter first and then speak to him in person. Maria left the note on her boss's desk at the end of the workday when he was gone, but planned to retrieve it the next morning as she had changed her mind and wanted to discuss the matter face to face. Unfortunately, the note was no longer on the desk the following morning, indicating that Paul had already taken it. In any case, she spoke with her boss, and they came to an agreement on repaying the debt. Maria's story seemed unconvincing, especially since the police had already caught her lying, which made them suspect her involvement in the case once more. However, there was no concrete evidence proving her guilt. 8 months after the murder, there was a real breakthrough in the investigation. A man was arrested for an unrelated crime. The most interesting thing is that he used similar firearms, a .22 caliber pistol. After checking, it turned out that his shells were identical to those found in the house of the Paul Jarrett. Meanwhile, a confidential informant tipped off the police about a planned armored car robbery. The criminals intended to recruit someone among the security guards to carry out their plan, which involved killing the other guards and stealing the cash transport. However, the security guard approached by the criminals decided to outsmart them. He informed the police of their plan, which led to the successful capture of the suspects. The individuals were identified as Jose Barca and Ruben Fernandez. Notably, one of them possessed the same pistol used in the shootings of Paul and Greg. Furthermore, a pistol stolen from the Paul residence was also found in their possession, eliminating any possibility of coincidence. This evidence confirmed their involvement in the double murder. The reason why no neighbors heard gunshots during the attack became apparent. The perpetrators had used silencers on their guns. During the interrogation, the police discovered that they had another accomplice, Juan Carlos Fernandez. He admitted to knowing Maria Katabi, with whom he had a romantic relationship that Maria had hidden from the police. Juan confessed that Maria had asked him to break into her boss Paul's house to retrieve a letter. Maria had previously stolen money from Paul and had written a confession of embezzlement, which she left on Paul's desk. She later regretted this but was too scared to ask the doctor to return the letter. Maria wanted to destroy the letter but had no chance, so she begged Juan to help her get it back. The consequences could have been serious, potentially costing her both her job and her freedom if her boss contacted the police. Not wanting to go to jail, Maria asked her boyfriend to help her steal the Juan agreed and asked his brother Ruben and his friend Jose to do the job. Maria gave them information about the house. All she asked for was a letter admitting her embezzlement. She did not kill them. She also said that Paul's house rarely locked its front door, so gaining access to the house was not a problem, allowing the criminals to easily break in. However, they did not know where to find a small note in such a large house. Realizing that this might wake the homeowner, they decided that they would kill them first and then search the house without getting caught. So that is what they did. They shot Paul first, then his son Greg. Surprisingly, even after searching the entire house, They could not find the note they were looking for. The robbers then left, taking the gun with them. Despite a thorough police search, the note was never found. Paul's attentive daughter accidentally discovered this crucial piece of evidence. All 3 accomplices involved in Greg's shooting were arrested. They attempted to prove their innocence in the murders of the doctors. Jose Barca was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Juan Carlos' trial took much longer than those of the other defendants. He underwent mental evaluations and claimed he was not aware of the true nature of events. He had been struggling with significant mental health issues for many years, casting doubt on his ability to perceive reality accurately. It was known that he had suffered a serious head injury, which was exacerbated by a fall from a great height, worsening his mental problems. This was the main cause of the incident. Questions quickly arose as to whether one knew renowned psychiatrist Paul Jarrett and had a grudge against him, which could have been the real motive for the crime. However, these speculations could not be confirmed. In the end, one still had to stand trial. In 2016, nearly 13 years after the crime, he confessed to the murders of Paul Jarrett and Greg. He apologized to the victims' families and asked them to pray for him in the name of Christ. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His brother, Ruben Fernandez, also admitted to being an accomplice in the robbery because he was the driver. Ruben said he did not know about Juan and Jose's murderous intentions. They had originally come to the house to retrieve a letter. When the shooting began, Ruben feared that the homeowner was shooting at the robbers, so he fled the scene. As a result, he was sentenced to 7 years of probation. This light sentence was due to a lack of evidence linking him to the murders. Maria Catabe was arrested and had to stand trial. She had a troubled past, but things seemed to improve when she got a job at Floor Drop. She was desperate to find the letter, as losing it could endanger her life and job security. Maria had no previous convictions, so her lawyer was optimistic about securing a suspended sentence. Maria Catabe went to trial. The prosecution insisted on a harsh sentence for the double murder, arguing that she had orchestrated the crime by directing the perpetrators to Paul's home. If Maria had not tried to find the letter she had written and given to Paul, it is possible that both victims would still be alive. The prosecutor's office needed evidence. In the meantime, Maria was in jail and talking to another inmate. During one conversation, Maria made a surprising confession to the inmate. She revealed that the doctor had no intention of firing her or contacting the police. He just wanted his money back. However, Maria was broke and in danger of losing her home due to mounting debt. She had no intention of returning the stolen money. As a trusted employee, she knew the doctor well and knew about the valuables in his home, which she saw as an opportunity to make more money. Maria staged the robbery and implicated her boyfriend to avoid incriminating herself and reduce her sentence. The lawyer insisted that Maria could not be charged with double murder. She didn't shoot the victims, didn't plan the murders, and never even entered their house. The defense argued that Maria's primary target was the note, which could be crucial to serious legal charges, not murder. It was reasonable for her to get rid of such potentially damaging evidence. In her statement, Maria repeated her testimony. She gave the doctor the note with the plan to retrieve it the next day and discuss it directly with her boss. However, when she returned, the note was gone from the table. The woman admitted that she had lured her boyfriend and his friends into the robbery, not knowing that they were dangerous and potentially violent. During the trial, tearfully shared tragic episodes in her life. She testified that she had been raped when she was 18 and had suffered abuse from her abusive father. She was regularly beaten by her husband after that. She hoped to escape this vicious cycle of abuse with her boss's money, but that plan failed. The jury found Maria Catabe not guilty of double murder, but guilty of armed robbery and sentenced her to 30 years in prison. During the trial, Alette stated that she had let go of her anger and hostility toward the defendants. Instead, she chose to focus on the good memories of her loved ones and seek justice. Alette now plans to honor Juan Carlos' request by praying for him. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.